Hello out there, this is the Irate Veteran coming at you with another video. Any veterans out there that need any veteran to veteran advice, send me an email, vamadness@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to give you that advice. All right, so today we're going to talk about sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is like any other claim. You're going to need your in-service evidence. You're going to need post-service evidence. You're going to need the evidence has to be relevant, and you're going to need, in most cases, a doctor's opinion in your favor, right? So no different from any other claim. So you're going to either try to connect it like any other claim, direct service connection or secondary connection. Direct service connection, you're going to have to show a diagnosis of sleep apnea in service. Or you're going to have to prove the onset of sleep apnea during service, right? So, and to prove, most people aren't going to have it diagnosed in service, right? Because it just usually doesn't happen. I've only seen a few cases where it actually has happened and there's been some kind of dispute about it. So most people are trying to prove that they had symptoms in service, although it wasn't diagnosed, right? So you're going to need a doctor's opinion to explain that those symptoms were sleep apnea that you're now diagnosed with, right? And if he can explain that really well, then hopefully you win your claim. One of the things I've noticed with Board of Veterans Appeal decisions is, and it's really this last year or so, I've noticed it a lot more. And I don't know if because we got so many doctors out now that people could pay for opinions. And these guys, most of them are, I'm not recommending any, but some of the stuff that I've read that at the Board of Veterans Appeals that they've said, I mean, it looks like most of them are on the ball. Now, I've seen some of them who were stupid too, but the idea is it looks like, they most of them probably do a fair to middling job, right? But if they would send their research in, if they're quoting research to show that, sleep apnea, is he had sleep apnea in service, and I'm because I know this from research that's been done, and here's the research. And if it's actually sent into the board, it seems to make a bigger impact on the board to not just cite it, but cite it and then send that research study in with your evidence, right? That would be the best way to do it if you can do it that way, right? So if you get an opinion and they're going to cite research, try to get them to send that research in also. Um, Secondary service connection. Now you're just saying you have a service connected condition like your elbow, right? I've got on my elbow, it's the worst elbow ever. So now it's service connected, right? And you're saying my elbow is causing my sleep apnea. I can't sleep because it's the damn elbow, and that makes me breathe bad, right? Don't laugh. Right? It, I'm telling you, it can happen, right? So again, on a secondary is no different as far as the evidence. It's really important if they cite research, send it in. Um, so pretty simple. And if you look at the in-service evidence, which is the most important evidence, why? Because it happened while you were in service, right? And so if you have a diagnosis, of course, you're going to win that claim unless something, you either get a really, really stupid examiner, or I just I can't even figure out how you could lose that, right? As long as you still have sleep apnea, you have a current diagnosis, you had it diagnosed in service, that just should be a win. Bang. Right. So, but let's say the other thing, if you don't have that, you need to look for any type of sleep disturbances in your records. And I'm talking anything that might be connected to sleep apnea. You're fatigued all the time, right? And so you went to the doctor, I'm tired all the time. And that's in your notes someplace, or actually went to the doctor for that. or sleepwalking, insomnia, whatever it might be, to show you were having sleep problems, right? So if that's documented in your records, fabulous, right? That's good strong evidence. Um, and here's one thing that kills a lot of claims, and they refer to this all the time. Really, I can't count how many times I've seen it. When you separate from service, you go to a separation physical, and one of the things you have to do is fill out a medical history. You fill that out. Someone's not filling it out for you. So if you stated, there's a couple of boxes that talk about sleep problems, right? And if you didn't check those, and it's not noted in your records that you've had sleep problems, right? As far as anyone's concerned, you didn't have sleep problems in service, right? I mean, if that's the case, if those boxes aren't checked on your history form, because listen, you're telling people at the time, which is why it's so important. You're still in service when you're filling that out, and you have a question in front of you. Did you have these sleep problems? And you say, I didn't. But now it is years later, you're saying, oh, I did, but I didn't check those boxes because I didn't want to. I mean, is someone going to believe that? Right? So, if you didn't check those boxes, you better have a really good explanation for why you didn't, right? Because it's just, remember, one of the things they look at it when they're looking at evidence is it reasonable to believe that you actually had sleep problems and you check the box saying that you didn't? I mean, a lot of times people, they're just not going to believe that. This doesn't sound reasonable to most people who judge things, right? So, and of course, if you have some statements from, roommates, relatives, whoever, that notice you've had symptoms of sleep apnea. And by the way, when you're trying to get statements, you know, tell these people what are the symptoms of sleep apnea. They may have no idea. I mean, years ago, before I started helping veterans, you could ask them what sleep apnea was. I wouldn't have known it. I wouldn't even know what sleep apnea was, right? Much less knowing what the symptoms were, right? So when you approach people who you were in service with, or your wife or relatives, whoever, roommates, whoever it might be, tell them what the symptoms are. They'll say, oh yeah, oh, I seen that happening, and then have them write a statement to that effect. Now, there's one particular symptom that's more important than any other symptom. Why? And I have it listed here: episodes of breathing cessation during sleep witnessed by another person. What is sleep apnea, right? You're not breathing when you're supposed to be, right? If someone witnesses you not breathing oddly, if they witness you like, wow, it looks like he's stopping, his chest isn't rising, you can see he's not taking in any air. I mean, and then he'll take some. I mean, someone notices that and they write that down. I mean, they're basically saying that they witnessed sleep apnea, right? And let me tell you, it would be hard for a VA examiner to overcome that. Yes, they're going to look. A VA examiner is going to look for every possible reason to deny your claim. And how is he going to explain that someone witnessed you stop breathing? What? You got heart problems? Okay, someone will file. I'll file for that, right? I mean, the whole point is that is such a great symptom. Ask your witnesses, did anyone notice that? Because certainly a wife might see that every night, right? If she hasn't moved to another room because of your snoring, right? But I mean, the whole point is, man, if you can get that down, it's a great symptom to have noted. So also on post-service evidence, again, you're looking for sleep problems, right? Did you have anything documented and even noted? Remember, you might be going to the doctor for headaches, and you might casually mention, I'm really tired all the time, and they put that in the notes. Well, there's your symptom of sleep apnea. Write it, make sure you highlight that, right? And of course, you'll need a sleep study after service, right, to show you have a current diagnosis. And you're going to need a statement of continued symptomatology. Now, remember, you're saying in most cases, you had symptoms in service and you have a current diagnosis now. Now you have to connect that gap. You were, let's say it's a year, right? You need to say, it's real simple. The symptoms I had in service continued after service to now, right? Real simple. My symptoms never stopped. If you don't say that, the assumption is that they did stop, right? That your symptoms stopped and then they started again because of something else, not because of service. Something else made it restart, right? Well, you want to make sure that they don't conclude that, which, by the way, they can and do, right? So make sure you get that explained in your statement that, listen, these symptoms have been with me the whole time, right? So, and of course, statements noting observed symptoms again after service if you've got people that write them. And let me say another thing about statements. And let me go on to the next slide, right? It's the evidence for direct service connection is basically three forms: symptoms that are observed, symptoms that are documented, and diagnosed conditions, right? So of those three types, observed things are the weakest, right? I'm not saying they're weak, but they're the weakest of the three types, right? And something that's documented, that's strong, right? And something that's been diagnosed, bang, right? That's good. But that weak observed symptoms, let's say you only have like one witness, right? Well, and your own statement, right? That's okay. That really keeps it in that weak type of evidence category because there's all kinds of questions that come up about um, uh, statements. The veterans, remember, statements are self-serving, right? And thus, you know, credibility and honesty, may be questioned, right? And if it's years after the fact, memory can be questioned. There's numerous reasons why someone would assign less weight to something that's observed. But let's say instead of one or two statements, you had 10 statements, all who have witnessed, snoring or daytime tiredness or whatever it might be, or a whole variety of the symptoms. Now that weak observation is much, much, much stronger, right? Because it wasn't just noticed by one or two people, it was noticed by a lot of people. And it really isn't reasonable. And really, a judge at the Board of Veterans Appeals is, he might question one or two of them, but when you got a lot of them, he is absolutely not going to question them, right? He's going to believe what's been said is very credible, and that'll have a big impact, right? So just remember, the more you can bring that weak type of evidence up just by having more of it, right? Um, Now, each one of these types of evidence, whether it's observed, documented, or diagnosed, um, can be even less. For instance, an observed system it's already weak if you noticed it in service. It's the weak type of evidence. And you noticed it in service, which makes it a good thing, right? But let's say it was noted after service, right? And let's say it was noted long after service. Now you have a weak piece of evidence that's even weaker because of the gap in time, right? So the further documentation, observations, or diagnosis happen from service separation, the weaker that piece of evidence is, right? So um, that's just how they look at it, right? So just remember that, right? Because you're going to need to weigh your own evidence, right? And if you have a weak case, make it stronger, right? Find a way, right? And if you can't, then you probably shouldn't bother. Let's just go through one. And I'm going through one that I see all the time. Right? On denials. Right? These are ones that the regional office got right, which ain't that many, tell you the truth. They're like in the 80 percentile wrong most of the time. But this is in the 20% that they get right a lot, right? Which is The veteran has no sleep complaints in service, and on his medical history form, he didn't mark the box saying he had sleeping problems, right? Which means you starting your case out with a very weak case because there's nothing in your service record where you've said that you had sleep problems while you were in service, right? So now, where not checking those boxes on your medical history form can be mitigated is if you actually had sleep problems documented in your records. You just didn't check the boxes. That's fine. That's easily explained to them because you really have some documentation, right? But if you don't have documentation and you didn't check the boxes, that really a reasonable judge is going to believe that you did not have anything wrong as far as you knew then. But remember, we're not doctors. It's possible for us to not know, right? But again, it's going to stand against you, right? So um, he has his statement and his wife's statement, both saying that he really snored loud. I see that a lot on sleep apnea claims, and snoring's the main thing I hear, right? So, but snoring, as the VA examiner will say, it could be anything, right? So, it's certainly not sleep apnea, right? So now it's also this veteran 5 years after service, he actually had it documented that he was, daytime sleepiness, his snoring's really bad, and he went to the doctor for that, and now it's documented, which it's good because you have a strong piece of evidence, something documented, right? But it's so long after service, it really weakens that piece of evidence because it stretches the its believability, right? That it's connected to service because it's 5 years after the fact, right? So now he also has it was diagnosed 7 years after service, right? So again, now you have a really strong piece of evidence, right? But again, 7 years after service, which significantly weakens that piece of evidence, right? It really does stretch the belief that it would be connected to service when it was first diagnosed 7 years after, right? So that's how they look at it. I'm not looking at it like that. But what I'm saying is it's reasonable for someone to look at it that way, right? So, and they do, right? So, and this veteran doesn't have a doctor's opinion in his favor. And the compensation and pension examiner, as they will do 999 times out of 1,000, they will give you a negative opinion, right? So don't count on the compensation and pension examiner to look at a record like this, right, where nothing in service, complaints after service, and then diagnosis long after, service separation. Once that examiner puts that negative opinion on, really, no matter how strong your case is, if you don't have an offsetting opinion of your own, you will lose the case every single time, right? If the VA examiner provided an adequate exam, which sometimes they don't, right? So often they don't, right? So, uh, but if he provided rationale and cited some research, uh, you will you know you will lose, right? So now let's just change one element in this case, right? Because right now this is a shit case. This veteran, I mean, don't even, you got it denied. Don't bother appealing it. You'll never win, ever. There's not one possibility in hell a claim like this will win, right? But let's just say one factor was different in this case. Let's say the wife not only noticed snoring, but she noticed those episodes of you not breathing. Well, now we basically have a witness who witnessed sleep apnea, someone who sleeps with you every night, or roommates who may have been in room with you for years, right? That have noticed it happens all the time, right? Well, now, man, you just turned a crap case into a reasonable case, a reasonable belief that you actually had sleep apnea in service, right? So that's, what is getting observed is really important. Also, who observes it? I've also seen cases where observations were made by a friend of mine. He had a roommate that was a nurse, and she had wrote him a statement. Remember, she's a medical professional. She gets automatic credibility, right? And for knowing, recognizing symptoms of sleep apnea, right? So, bang, he ended up winning. Yeah, he was denied. He had to go to the Board of Veterans Appeals, but they, looked at that evidence and said, wow, well, we've got a medical professional here who noticed these symptoms during service, right? So, he ended up winning, right? So, just remember that. Who and what, are important. Who observed it and what was observed. So, if let's look through secondary claims. Now that we just covered direct claims. Secondary claims are different in that it doesn't matter when it was discovered. It doesn't matter if there were symptoms in service. None of that matters anymore. There's only one thing that matters, is that all right, what's that? That you have a doctor's opinion that says your service-connected condition, your elbow, right, is causing your sleep apnea. And the doctor provides the rationale and cites the research, and not only cites the research, but sends the research in along with his opinion to show that, wow, the elbow really did cause the sleep apnea, right? So if he does that and he explains it well and cites research, sends the research in, and let's say the VA examiner does the same thing, but with the negative opinion, well, you're likely still going to win, right? Because now you have off competing exams, right? Or competing opinions that are one positive, one negative. Veterans win, right? Anytime there's an equal, right? The benefit of the doubt, right? So, and the Board of Veterans Appeals at least, and I try to prepare claims for the Board of Veterans Appeals. Why? Because the people who work at the regional office are idiots, right? I don't care how well you prepare a claim. Most of the time, they're morons. They can't even read, I think. So, but anyway, but the Board of Veterans Appeals absolutely will notice this evidence, right? So, they do take the benefit of the doubt into consideration at the Board of Veterans Appeals, right? So, the rationale and the research provided by your opinion maker is what's going to win your case. So it's really important that that the doctor says the right things and explains it well from a medical science perspective, and gets that research cited and hopefully sent in with the opinion, right? So because I've looked at thousands of just sleep apnea claims and at the Board of Veterans Appeals. And I've seen PTSD, as sleep apnea secondary to PTSD, to sinusitis, to TBI, to mood disorder, to weight gain, to asthma, to deviated septum, to narcotics. And I've seen those win. And I've seen those same exact ones lose, right? Or those same PTSD, citing the same reasoning, win and lose, right? All because the VA examiner provided better rationale, right? So you need your guy to provide really good stuff. Otherwise, and if he does, you'll probably win. The thing is, how do you recognize that? Well, if you get a one sentence, this is as likely as not connected to his service, because everyone knows PTSD and sleep apnea go together. I mean, okay, you lose, right? That's a stupid opinion, right? You need to look at it and at least say, wow, he's explaining it really well, this connection, right? If you don't see it explained really well, then you need to ask the doctor, could you go into a little more detail? Because I already tell you, details matter. Because you're going to, again, secondary to win it, It's nothing but competing opinions, right? Your doctor's opinion and the VA. So I got a couple of claims here that are interesting. Now, I just went through and grabbed a couple. I mean, you could find thousands of them just like this. And like in this particular case, the doctor here is saying that a deviated septum is the reason the veterans has this sleep apnea. And the doctors actually right here, if you look at there's a little part here that says if he provided a article titled, the effects of nasal pathologies on obstructive sleep apnea, right? So, he not only, is citing references, the board has the reference to look at, right? It's a powerful evidence, right? And he explains really well how that nasal pathology, the deviated septum, is relevant to the sleep apnea. And he's saying, well, and then here's an article that says, it's been studied and really it's, pretty much proven, right? And so it sounds great, but of course the VA examiner here, um, it says, while the board acknowledges that the VA examiner opinioned reported the veteran's residuals of the injury to the nose and a deviated septum did not cause aggravation or diagnose sleep apnea or diagnose sleep apnea. The board. So, in other words, he says and he says here the medical literature. You should read these. The medical literature is saying it doesn't support. Right. Well, but here's the doctor. Your doctor provided an actual article of research that does say it aggravates it, right? So this veteran won because of what his doctor said. And remember, the VA doctors are pretty much idiots, right? They're going to write, no matter what they write, they are only going to look for negatives, right? So if they miss positives, it really lowers their credibility. And that's one thing you need to point out if you notice it. And here's just such a claim. This is a PTSD sleep apnea claim, sleep apnea secondary to PTSD. And in this particular case, the big long paragraph, right? The big long paragraph is the VA doctor explaining how there's just no possible way that PTSD has anything to do with the sleep apnea. It's been proven. I mean, really, he goes on and on and on. And one of the things he doesn't mention, and I'm sure most of you probably heard this who are interested in sleep apnea anyway, that the number one risk factor in sleep apnea, causing sleep apnea, is weight, obesity, being overweight, right? And that's what they usually deny claims on, saying, well, he got big. That's what causes sleep apnea. I see that all the time, right? Veterans lose for that all the time. Well, in this case, weight gain was a favorable factor for this veteran, right, to win his claim. So the VA examiner, you can read all through the thing. Not one time does he mention weight. Why? Because in this particular case, weight is a favorable factor. So he's just staying away from it. He's not even going to mention it, right? But in this particular case, and by the way, all PTSD cases, I mean, look at your medicine. I got medicine right here. This one right here. What is this? Prozac. Go read in Prozac, right? For it causes weight gain. And that's exactly what happened here. The medications he was taking for PTSD, according to his opinion from his doctor, right? The medication caused him to gain weight. And yeah, he got sleep apnea due to his weight gain, right? And since the VA examiner didn't even address it, right? The private doctor's opinion won, right? Because why? He had a rational opinion, right? That made sense, right? And so just remember, anyone with PTSD or any mental health issues at service connection, look at your medicine if you have sleep apnea. Look, have you gained weight since then? Of course, you could still lose. I mean, let's just say, you were 10 pounds, or 15 pounds overweight, and then you started taking medicine and you never gained any weight after that, well, you can't say your medicine caused you to gain weight because you weren't even taking medicine when you gained the weight. But if you gained 15 pounds and then later you gained 10 more, then you gained weight because of the medication. And that extra 10 pounds could have been what led to your sleep apnea, right? So it's really important to look at your medications. Now, here's one, and this is the last one I'm going to go through, but you could look these cases up yourself. Um, and the here, it's who's saying it, right? There's a negative opinion and a positive opinion, right? Competing opinions, just like it always is, right? And but in this case, we have a family practice doctor, which is the VA physician, and the veterans doctor, who is a board certified neurologist, right? And the judge, that's just how he made his ruling. I mean, because remember, judges aren't doctors either. All they can see is some rationale that looks reasonable. I mean, they don't know. They're not doctors either, but they see it and it looks like it's adequately explained. Both doctors adequately explained it. But now he's looking at, wow, but we have one guy who just happens to be an expert in this field. Right? He's a neurologist, right? So he just says right here, he's deferring to the expert. And the veteran wins simply because his doctor is had the right credentials. So yes, isn't again who observes something, who diagnoses something, it could all be important, right? So I'm not going to hold you anymore, but like I said, you have any questions about this type of stuff on sleep apnea? Hopefully I covered it here. If not, shoot me an email. I'm happy to help. Irate Veteran out.